Um, good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Robbins, and I am an environmental science teacher at Westfield High School. You may know me from my days as a middle school science teacher at Roosevelt Intermediate School, where I spent some time as both an 8th grade and 7th grade science teacher. I'd like to welcome everyone to our 4-part series on green careers. This is an incredibly important and incredibly exciting topic an area of incredible growth for people for individual careers. Tonight is part one of a 4-part series on why green careers and exploring green careers. This is possible from the very hard work of our presenters and from the Westfield Green Team. I would like to welcome Lois and Medea from the Westfield Green Team and also extend our thanks for them and for all the work to get the event set up. And they're going to tell us a few words about the Green Team, a few words about the event, and then we will hear from our panelists for the evening.
Hi, I'm Lois from the Westfield Green Team and coming specifically from Education and Outreach Committee. Thank you for joining us either live or through a recorded session. We are delighted to be offering this virtual Green Career Fair to show students, especially Westfield High School students, but others are invited to a wide range of potential career paths that they may consider to support sustainability. Our hope is that you will be inspired to put your talents to work toward making our community, state, and country more sustainable and green. We are always looking for student volunteers to engage with the Green Team. You may contact us at greenteam@westfieldnj.gov, which will be at the end of this presentation, to discuss volunteer opportunities. Enjoy the webinar.
Okay, so thank you, Lois. So the format of tonight's presentations is we're going to be sharing and looking at a few slides as our presenters are talking, and yes, and so Michael, would you like to take it away?
Absolutely. Hey, Westfield students, families, and guests. Even though I'm beaming in from Long Valley, it's nice to be back sharing time and space with the town that pretty much helped launch my professional career as an educator. My name is Mike Chodroff, and I currently am founder and CEO of the Ripple Center, but I'll tell you more about that after you hear the abbreviated environmental journey my life has taken, and also how my eco principles affected the career choices I did not make at the time. Baba Diam, who is a forestry engineer in Senegal, which is a country in West Africa, said in 1967 that in the end, we will conserve only what we love love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. Well, conservation is in my soul because I was taught to love everything about this incredible planet. And I figured the best way to protect it is to educate others on why they should love it too. Although I've always had an innate connection with nature, my parents were the ones who taught me about the natural world, which I ultimately fell in love with. The photo you see on the bottom right is my mom putting me, baby me, up close and personal with a goat, I want to say at the Turtleback Zoo, so I would not fear animals. Well, 2 summers ago, she and I spent 10 days in Tanzania in awe of the incredible wildlife of that region. My dad gave me my first guide to trees and plants, which I used to lead nature walks with some of my 8-year-old neighborhood friends. And he'd also bring me to the recycling center back in the days when you had to separate glass by color. He'd hand me a bottle and I'd practice my baseball outfield throwing, watching the glass shatter and making recycling desirable. I still even remember some of the lines of the poem I wrote in 3rd grade for an assignment in 1983. A tree gives off beauty, a tree gives off shade. It is from a tree that a pencil is made. Some trees weigh up to a ton, but if we keep cutting them down, then we'll have none. Now, I'm going to be honest. From the time I was a kid, I was set on working in television. Whether as a journalist or a writer, I was determined for that to be my career. And although it's important to have goals and dreams and aspirations, it's equally important to be flexible and open to change while maintaining the things that are important to you. My career path has never been a straight line, but I always made sure they aligned with my values. So in high school, as an East Brunswick Bear, I was really involved with student government and was a member of our school's environmental club. My senior year, I sat on the Township Board of Education as the student representative, giving me a really good insight as to what is valued and funded at the district level. I was always a mix of environmentalist, leader, and educator, and all of these experiences I still carry with me. All of our experiences, whether good or bad, have lessons that are meant for us as individuals to learn. I went to Rutgers, where I double majored in journalism and communication with a minor in English, and I started getting involved in radio and interning at television studios in New York. However, it was during those years, both in the classroom and through firsthand experiences, that I became aware of systemic racism in that industry, as well as a manipulation of information. And a few weeks before graduating, suddenly I decided that it was not the path I wanted to take. So naturally, I became a financial planner. I spent months studying for my Series 7, which I passed, and then was able to sell stocks, bonds, and other investment vehicles. In the year I spent in that industry, I learned more about economics and finances than I had throughout all of my schooling. I also realized that where we put our money is a reflection of our values, and the majority of products that I was selling were investments in non-sustainable practices. This too made me realize it was not quite the industry for me, but because of that experience, I have now created a portfolio with companies and products that invest in an equitable and sustainable future. So after that, I decided to become a young entrepreneur and started a company. Arm & Arm Publishing was officially incorporated in 1997 when I was 23 years old. The Rutgers Student's Unofficial Guide to College hit the bookstores the following year, and 4 more unofficial guides were published after that. Now, having the platform of creating my own books, I sprinkled messages in them about the importance of recycling and environmental stewardship, and we even planted trees to offset the printing of the books. Remember, if we cut them all down, then we'll have none. But despite how much I learned and enjoyed running my own business, I still didn't feel as if it was the career for me. So I joined another small publisher in Springfield, New Jersey, and took over their sales and marketing. Well, 12 minutes down the road was Kean University, and a year into my job, I decided to go back and get my post-baccalaureate degree in K-8 education. Now, side note, I had been a camp counselor, a youth group leader, an educator at my temple, and a babysitter, and I loved working with children. And I always thought that after a career in media, I'd retire and become an educator. So why not just start a little early? After a year and a half, which included my student teaching, I landed my first job at Tamaqua Elementary School in Westfield in January of 2002 as a replacement for the 5th grade teacher who had been promoted to administration. And then it all began, my love affair with environmental education. So there are so many stories about how I was able to incorporate information about our natural world, the effects humans were having on our planet, and stewardship opportunities into the math, science, language arts, and history skills that needed to be taught to 5th graders. When I first arrived, there was no recycling in the school system, but my class and future classes ran campaigns in the school for students to recycle. They would go around on Fridays, pick up the bins, we'd load up my SUV, and I would take them to my local recycling center. After letter writing campaigns to the mayor and the town council, a few years later, the official recycling pickups began. During language arts, we would write stories, turn them into scripts, and then film movies with environmental themes. We raised money to purchase and preserve rainforests, and we reduced, reused, and recycled throughout the years. In 2007, while I was attending Ramapo for my master's in educational technology, I left Tamaqua and joined the tech department to implement a new curriculum for the district. So I spent my mornings at Edison and my afternoons in Roosevelt teaching students how to utilize Microsoft tools, create websites, and use Photoshop. They produced their own businesses, making logos, business cards, proposals, and pitch decks. They built websites focused on an aspect of environmental protection. And I also happened to, that time, advise the environmental club at Edison. And though I loved working in Westfield, something else was calling me. The Willow School in Gladstone, New Jersey, which was only 5 years old at the time, had buildings that were all energy efficient and built using sustainable engineering and design practices. And the umbrella of all the curriculum was about sustainability. So I made the decision to leave your wonderful community and fully immerse myself in environmental education. There, I taught 4th and 5th grade and then moved on to teach 6th through 8th science. I became a member of a statewide organization called the Alliance for New Jersey Environmental Education, better known as ANGE, and it just so happens next month will conclude my 4-year term as president of that organization. I was also nominated back then to sit on the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection's Commission on Environmental Education, which I still serve on. Just yesterday morning, we were on a Zoom call with First Lady of New Jersey, Tammy Murphy, as we discussed the climate change standards. And as an educator at and representative of the Willow School, I networked with individuals locally, statewide, and nationally that were environmental influencers. 5 years later, knowing that I wanted to bring this knowledge and experience elsewhere, I was hired as a science teacher and first director of sustainability at Farbrick School in Short Hills, which is where I've spent the last 8 years helping influence purchasing practices, cleaning product application, curriculum, schoolyard maintenance, and more. I've given workshops, talks, and advised students and adults on green choices in their schooling, their careers, and lives in general. Well, 2 months ago, I decided it was time to take the entirety of my life's journey and give another shot at starting up my own organization. One that I actually started dreaming about and scribbling notes down while I was teaching at Tamaqua. The Ripple Center, which is an officially recognized 501c3 nonprofit in New Jersey, is in the planning and fundraising phase as we speak. The Ripple Center will be a fellowship program where young adults ages 18 to 24 experience entrepreneurship for change. So this journey of disruption happens through virtual and in-person learning, impact traveling, meaningful mentorship, and a crafting a pitchable business plan that positively affects people and planet while focusing on turning a profit. Now, ultimately, through a network of professional educators, influencers, and change makers, fellows will learn about and create businesses that are founded on the tenets of human equality and dignity and environmental responsibility. So here's the good news for all of you. The television, film, and media industry is now chock full of opportunities for folks who look at the world through a green lens. The financial industry has more tools now for people who want to invest in a sustainable future. And as a matter of fact, I would argue that any and every career path that you choose, there will be an advantage for those that understand environmental impacts and whose decision-making is made upon those principles. So at the end of the day, just do what you love, but incorporate the conservation of our earth because that is what you've been taught. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Michael. That was amazing. And we're very excited. And I think there's going to be some great questions in a little bit to talk to you. Our next presenter is Dr. Tuininga. Amy, are you there? Oh, there you are.
I am here. Hi, everyone. It's very nice to be here, and thanks for inviting me onto the panel. And I'm so glad, Michael, that you mentioned sustainability, because I'm going to talk about that a little bit too. So first, a tiny bit about me, but then I want to get on to some things that are opportunities for you all. When I grew up first in New York State, and then we moved to Kansas. And Kansas is really hot, so I spent a lot of time swimming and water skiing in the summer. And then I moved from Kansas to do my bachelor's degree at the University of Washington in Seattle. And I studied botany, plants. And why did I do that? I didn't know. I didn't go there to study botany. I went there to study anthropology. So don't think that you have to have it all planned out right now. A lot of things come into play, and all of these things come in to build a whole picture for you later on. So I studied botany, and when I finished that, I went up to the high Arctic. I was above the magnetic North Pole doing field work where there were polar bears at the time. And I came back and I worked a little bit in a lab as a technician, and then I went to do a master's degree at Oregon State in botany and plant pathology. I worked at the US EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and I had a National Network for Environmental Management Fellows, a fellowship, so a NEMS fellowship. So you can find ways to get funding all along the way. As an undergrad, I had a Howard Hughes undergraduate research scholarship, and these can pay some of your way through college. Once I got to grad school, it was all covered. They pay you to go to grad school if you're in STEM. So if you're good and you're in STEM, you don't have to pay to go to school once you get to the graduate level after your first 4-year degree. And you go on to a graduate degree for a couple of years or 4 or 5 years, and they should pay you. Then I came to New Jersey to do my PhD at Rutgers. And I studied in the Pine Barrens. I studied fire and I studied atmospheric pollution when I graduated at Rutgers. I started teaching at Rowan, and then I got a job at Fordham University in New York City. And I went from an assistant professor to an associate chair and associate dean of the graduate school. And then I oversaw research at the whole university for a while before I went to my current position, which brings us back to sustainability. So now I'm director of the PSEG Institute for Sustainability Studies at Montclair State University. And if you could go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about sustainability. So this is a really, really big field, and this connects directly to green careers. And as Michael mentioned, the areas within sustainability include the environment and the economy and communities and people. So again, we call it the people, planet, and profit, the 3 Ps, or the triple bottom line. And so that helps us to think about what sustainability really is. It's things that help us to persevere into the future. So taking really good care of our planet, taking really good care of our natural resources, so they're available for future generations, but just also thinking about the kinds of technologies that are necessary in order to make that happen. And that's where the career growth is occurring right now. And it's a lot because of climate change, because we're emitting a lot of carbon into the atmosphere and we're having to address that. All of these new technologies are coming out, and a lot of them have to do with clean energy. So we're seeing some of the fastest growth in careers for solar voltaic installers, 105%. For wind turbine service technicians, 96%. And some of these estimates are coming from the previous census from 2010, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So I'm really anxious to get the 2020 census data to see, how much more growth we're going to be seeing in these careers. You could go to the next slide, please. I'll give you some real dollar amounts. So if you're interested in being a solar technician, you can do that right out of high school and make $46,000 a year. That's a lot of money right out of high school. So you might do it for a little bit, or you might skip right over that and go to college. If you get a bachelor's degree in science as like an environmental scientist, right after 4 years of college, you can start earning $73,000 a year. So you're almost doubling your salary by going to college. If you were a hazardous materials removal worker, so you might be removing asbestos or leaking oil tanks, right out of high school, you could earn $45,000 a year. That's a lot of money right out of high school. But if you stick with it and go on for a bachelor's degree in environmental engineering, you could earn $92,000 right out of college. So after your 4-year degree. Similarly, if you want to get a technical certification, you could be a wind turbine technician and earn about $56,000. So there's all kinds of careers. You can find a lot of information at the Bureau of Labor Statistics and onetonline.org. So it doesn't necessarily have to be green energy or clean energy or a technology career. There's a lot of other kinds of careers where we're focused on communities and community structure and helping communities to grow and access things like fresh, healthy vegetables. So there are nonprofits you might work in and help build out community gardens, for instance. So if you go to the next slide, I can tell you a little bit more about the kinds of internship opportunities that might be available to you if you go to college. I run a very big internship program called the Green Teams, and you're welcome to join us virtually on June 3rd and hear more about the projects the students are going to be attending to this summer, working on this summer. We have 60 students working on 12 teams, so 5 students from different universities and different majors come together to work on projects. And in this case, you see in the upper left-hand corner, we had a team serving ADP, and they were at the Chelsea Innovation Lab in New York City. In the upper right, you see a team that was working with New Jersey Transit to help them build out a plan for purchasing EV buses. And that team wrote code. They rode around on buses with an environmental sensor, and they collected data on the environmental sensor. And then they outputted the data from the environmental sensor, wrote code, Python code. Some of you may code already, and this is a really big field that's going to be exploding in the next couple of years. And they input the specs from different electric vehicle EV bus manufacturers and helped New Jersey Transit to choose which buses to purchase. So you don't necessarily have to be out, building things. You could be working on a computer and writing code and helping the environment. In the lower left, you see a team that was building out solar arrays for Hydrogen House. They were also working on hydrogen fuel cell technology. So hydrogen cars that don't even use gas. And they were building out some of the hydrogen fueling stations on site as well. In the lower right, this is a different kind of green technology, and Michael referred to this as well. And so this gets to supply chain. This is Ecos. You might have purchased Ecos, which is an environmentally friendly laundry detergent or dish soap. We had a team of students there working with them on their water use, because touring this manufacturing facility, it's the cleanest, tidiest, most sustainable company I have ever toured, especially for manufacturing. They recycle everything, including the tape on the boxes. So it was hard for us to find a project to help them to be more sustainable. But what they were asking us to do was to reduce the amount of water they used. And so we designed a whole bunch of different kinds of things to help reduce the water and to treat the water on site, so it didn't have to be treated off-site as hazardous waste. It wasn't even hazardous. It just had like flower petals in it, which provide phenolics, and the phenolics can't just go down the drain in a large quantity. So great company that we worked for. We'll be working for them again in the future, I'm sure. This summer we'll be working again with New Jersey Transit, and we'll have 11 other companies that you can come and learn about on June 3rd. But these are some of the kinds of things that you can do as an undergraduate to prepare you for careers and to sample. I think sampling is really important. You don't have to have everything figured out, but internships and apprenticeships are really great, and co-ops are really great ways for you to get to explore what kinds of things are out there. And this field is growing so fast that there's plenty of opportunity and well-paid opportunities as well. So I welcome your questions, and I look forward to you moving into some of these college and career pathways.
Whoops. Wow, that was incredible. I see that there's a bunch of questions popping up in the chat, and also we have got a bunch of questions as well. Gail, we'd love to hear from Gail, and then we will open up for discussion and some questions.
Absolutely. What a tough act to follow. Both Amy and Mike, I've really thoroughly enjoyed hearing both of your journeys and experiences into sustainability. I think while the slide appears on the screen, I just wanted to start with this quote, which I really feel like encapsulates or summarizes my journey into my career. And it's that, do not follow where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. My journey was not so straight. Just starting out with my experience, I think the slide, let's see. I'm not sure if Jeff, if you're able to see my slide.
One second, is we're Nope. Do you know what slide number it is?
I believe it is.
Right above
Slide number
Amy's.
4.
Oh, okay. Got it. Whoop.
Oh, okay.
Ah, perfect. There you
So-
are. I'm sorry.
Yeah, here I am. So from an early age, I actually developed a love of nature, the beach, hiking. By way of origin, my parents are from the Caribbean, so I've always come to know the environmentally sensitive nature in which we grew up in and where I would vacation to. So from an early age, I began to understand why it was so important to preserve and really appreciate my surroundings. I just wanted to say that as a balance to my career and a lot of my work activities, which I'll explain, I try to incorporate a work-life balance, which I think is necessary. So my favorite hobbies are dance. I happen to actually be on a dance team here in New Jersey, and I enjoy photography, especially nature photography. That became a favorite passion of mine during COVID-19, during this pandemic. I started my career with actually an interest in public policy. From the time I was in high school, I went to a high school public in Edison, New Jersey, where I'm born and raised. And I had the fortune of taking a class called AP Government. And what was really unique about this class was we had a professor that offered that they would give us a firsthand tour of K Street in Washington, of congressional buildings, and of the Pentagon. So it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that really hit me as I want to be here. I want to know how I can participate in government, but also look at other technical aspects of being involved in the environment. So from high school, from that experience, I also participated in Model United Nations, which helped increase my skill set in public speaking and learning how to debate and have healthy dialogue, which I think is so necessary. So Model United Nations was one of my, I guess, entrees into getting involved in government, actually. Following that, I attended Rutgers College right here in New Brunswick. I was a graduate of their BA program, Are You Rah Rah? So it was a great experience in that I got to see what it was like to obtain opportunities locally. So a lot of my classmates opted to go to Maryland, NYU, and several programs across the state, but I really wanted to find an opportunity that was close to home that I know I would come back to and be very passionate about and integral to improving my community. So I actually, when I say my journey wasn't so straight, I started out studying investment banking. At the time when I was studying investment banking, there was a big market turn that actually hit in 2008. So in my experience, I started to figure out, how do I network? How do I find classmates that are also getting involved in investment banking? How can I find internships? So I fell upon a group called the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. I wasn't studying engineering, but I knew that they had a great network. I knew that they had a great resource group for guiding how to critique a resume, how to go to a conference and attend and speak to alumni about what you're interested in pursuing once you graduate. So from that, I was able to find internship opportunities at Goldman Sachs and a number of other banks. But unfortunately, in 2008, if you get to study economics in your coursework, that path did not work out for me, as I thought maybe this market is going in a different direction. At that time, I was actually focusing on mortgages, mortgage analytics and derivatives trading. That was a market that my parents were actually involved in wealth management. So I got to see the shift from what my parents had experienced in finance to what was happening very rapidly and never before seen in the financial industry. So I went back to my first passion, which was policy, government, and what job could I create within that pathway. I wasn't certain I wanted to be in litigation to become an attorney. So through my experience, I found that actually by participating in political science, I was able to find coursework in environment, in policy, in how to actually be a lobbyist, how to speak about actually being a champion for various issues. So I think through that coursework, I really fell upon what became my career choice, and that was I found an internship through an office of the Congressman Frank Pallone Jr., who ironically, and really grateful for having him as being not only a representative here in New Jersey, but also being the chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is a very powerful committee in Washington, D.C., which has a number of bills right now that are passing about the significance of investing in clean energy and clean jobs and green collar jobs. So through that experience, we were working on healthcare legislation, constituent affairs. I learned firsthand some of the issues that community members and stakeholders had that were heart-wrenching, and to be able to help out in that way in that internship was very meaningful to me. My next internship was actually through a company that is in New Brunswick, New Jersey, right next to Rutgers, called Greener by Design. And the way I fell upon that internship was I took a course called The Politics of New Jersey. So for me, it was very broad, but what I quickly learned was this course detailed the ways in which there's so many layers of government in New Jersey on the municipal level, the school board level, within counties. And we have a very unique governmental system here in New Jersey where we actually have an election every year, and not many states do. So there's always action, there's always something to become involved in. And with our great number of municipalities and towns and school boards, there's a lot of teamwork and a lot of campaign building and coalition building that happens here. So I got to learn that through the coursework and through networking from the principal of that company. Within the 9 years that I was there, I became the vice president of the company. So at a very young age, in the infancy of the company, I was able to help them build up a presence with having both public and private clients for sustainability consulting. So we focused on how we could help clients attain their goals, whether it be renewable energy, recycling practices. We had clients that had experiences with contamination. Unfortunately, we represented entities that they needed to understand, how do we clean our air, clean our water, clean lead service lines. And through those nine to 10 years there, it was a great experience that I felt like was very close to how you can implement projects in consulting. So it was very broad. My favorite experience there was actually with a buzzword that I'll drop, and hopefully I'll get questions about what this means, but resiliency, the ability to be resilient. In 2012, New Jersey experienced a never before seen weather event called a superstorm, Sandy. So in my tenure there at Greener by Design, we all were trying to figure out, how do we help communities respond to this disaster in a sustainable way? So that's where I actually got to quickly learn about new technologies such as microgrids, how to build a system that has backup energy. So if your house loses power for a number of days, where can you go to for a shelter that will maintain power? And what's considered a critical place that you can incorporate these new technologies in a smart and cost-efficient way. So through that experience, I worked with military applications, the federal government, towns, and NJ Transit. So it was a remarkable and fast learning experience to respond to that disaster. I do want to also just mention, in my current capacity, I guess you could see my picture here is actually an event that I participated in a year ago, which is a large networking event called the New Jersey League of Municipalities. So in this picture, I'm in my new role as the client manager of a full service engineering company called T&M Associates. And basically there, I serve as a direct front-facing individual that helps out public and private clients with finding solutions to their projects. So it could be highway, transportation, buildings, environmental, energy, and natural resource planning, how to respond to disasters. So here in my role, I'm practicing my skill set that I learned in high school, how to network. And here, actually next to me is a former assemblywoman who represented my district. So I got to the fortune of collaborating with her when she served as the chair of the Energy and Environmental Committee. So I'll go to the next slide.
Whoops, wait for.
So in my role, we serve as a trusted advisor, where our tagline, our motto is "Your goals, our mission." And what's really interesting about my job is every day is very different and dynamic. I never know what new client opportunity I might have, and what type of problem am I facing, or our clients are facing, that we have to help solve. And a lot of the opportunities right now are in this emerging market as we pivot from a lot of lessons that we've learned during the pandemic as this need for green collar jobs. So I started out in environmental consulting, but now there's a growing need for vertical farm consultants. There's a need because we're running out of land in New Jersey. So there's a need for finding creative ways for agriculture. There's also a push for electric vehicles. So there's a need for autonomous vehicle consultants and highway controllers that will look at how we redesign our roadways. I work in a group with electrical automation, where we learned that a lot of plants and power plants actually had to be virtually operated because of the pandemic. It was not safe to have a large amount of employees within a workplace. So we would work in teams to figure out how to do remote automation and control. So that's that electrical automation category. And then another growing area is mapping. Being able to identify data, critical data sets. So there's a whole amount of coursework and certifications that can be done in geographic information system mapping, GIS. So it's basically a fancy version of Google Maps, right? And then natural disaster recovery, that could be post-pandemic planning. How do we better re-enter buildings and schools? And then lastly, finance. So I'll close on a big part of my job, which I feel like gives me more security in my job, is the ability to research funding and grant writing. So I'm the only individual in my company at TNM currently in this full service engineering firm of about 330 professionals that does grant writing. So that's basically the art form, or the ability to write a proposal or an essay to convince a funder that you deserve money for projects. So right now, it is very popular as we recover from the pandemic to find funding that will pay for these projects. Will pay for clean water, clean air, and renewable energy. So I welcome any questions, and thank you so much for having me tonight.
That was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and that will bring this up. And let's take a look in the question and answers. Okay, and just quickly check it. Okay, so for our panelists, there was a lot of really incredible things that you were talking about, and I was wondering if one of you, multiple people mentioned words like fellowship, internship, co-oping, and could anyone like describe how those things are different to everyone who's listening? Because I'm not sure if they all represent the same thing, if they represent different things, if they represent different opportunities.
Sure, I can take that. So an internship is usually something where you're working for pay. Sometimes they're unpaid, but you should get pay. So go for the pay. You're working for a short period of time, a lot of times with a company, sometimes with a nonprofit or a government organization. Usually outside of your school, but sometimes you can do the work at home. It just depends, especially during the pandemic, there were some opportunities. So it's usually work for pay where you're learning a skill that you would use when you move into a career. When you do a co-op, it's pretty similar, but sometimes you get credit. You can also get credit for internships at a college. When you do, what was the other term that you had? Oh,
I
scholarships
believe,
and fellowships. Yeah.
fellowships.
Yeah. So scholarships are typically, sometimes they're just money that a university or some other organization will pay you to go to school. So a lot of times it pays for tuition, but sometimes it pays for other things. So you can apply for them. They're competitive. Sometimes you have to have certain criteria, like you have to have a high GPA, your grades have to be really good, or you have to have a good SAT score, or sometimes there's other criteria, like you have to be the first person in your family to go to college, or maybe you're from a certain Hispanic, a certain ethnic group, or a certain race, and that makes you eligible for those kinds of scholarships. Fellowships typically are for graduate students, so after you get your bachelor's degree. So when I did my bachelor's degree, that's the first degree that you might do after you graduate from high school. You might go to a community college and you might get a 2-year degree or an AA, or you might go to a 4-year college, or you might transfer from a 2-year to a 4-year college. But after you get that 4-year degree, that's called your bachelor's degree, then you can go to graduate school in a whole bunch of different areas. So it might be business or law or all different kinds of things. And during that time, oftentimes it's called a fellowship, where you get funding that pays, it can pay you a stipend. So when I was at Rutgers, they paid me to go to school there. They covered the cost of my tuition. And then in addition to that, I got a monthly stipend. And I had health insurance as a student, because the students are unionized at Rutgers. And so you should look for those kinds of opportunities, because you get money to study and get credentials that matter, because when you get those credentials, then you get more money to be able to pay your salary. And you saw some of those statistics for the difference between a high school education and a bachelor's degree. But if you continue and you look at graduate degrees, the numbers go up, 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 up.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you so much. And that's really important to be able to not only continue schooling, but to be able to have it either subsidized or funded as you're making progress into the field. Mike, this is a quick question for you. You were talking a little bit about the Ripple and getting it off the ground, and you were talking about looking for individuals in between 18, I guess as young as 18 and as old as 24. So are you primarily focusing on high school students? Are you focusing on college students? Are you focusing on students while they're in college to come to you with ideas? Like when would you want to see students coming to you, or young adults coming to you?
Yeah, great question. So essentially, well, the first cohort, like I said, we're kind of in the fundraising and the operation building phase. But the first cohort of our students, or our fellows, I should say, would be in July of 2022. The reason we're going to start in July is because that is often when there is no academic time going on. So part of our structure is that there's going to be this travel opportunities that would take place the end of July, beginning of August, and then students mostly will be going off to college, whether it's also high school, their senior year of high school, or in college. So during the months of September through December, they're really meeting with educators virtually. They're being paired up with mentors, and they're working on putting together an individualized business plan. Usually there's a break. There might be some travel in January, and then again for the rest of the semester, a similar structure with learning from educators and change makers and disruptors in different fields. And then when finals are over, towards the end of May, beginning of June, students would be able to pitch a business. So it's really, yes, there's going to be seniors in high school, there's going to be college students, and this can be done in conjunction with a student's studies during college. it's also if a student is taking a gap year, for example, this is a really wonderful gap year opportunity as well.
Wow. Okay, so that sounds like a really great opportunity for students, and for anyone who's like in the meet right now or seeing the meet recorded, they can expect like that this opportunity is going to build and kind of gain momentum.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as Amy was just describing, one of the nice things about doing this as a fellowship is in order to kind of level the playing field, it's a fully funded program. So it's based upon merit and passion. It's not based upon whether or not you can afford a program like this.
Wow. That's a super exciting opportunity for our students and the students that are coming up. Gail, you mentioned the idea of resilience, and it seems like resilience and green seem to usually come out at around the same breath. One thing that also we've seen that's very interesting is that like a lot of firms are helping rebuild after. Is your firm also, in addition to rebuilding, are there opportunities in like, for instance, hardening and increasing? Like, could you unpack the idea of resilience a little bit more? Like, what would that look like in the span of a day or a pitch?
Absolutely. What's interesting about resiliency is there's this large opportunity to plan for the event that there might be a potential disaster. And there are a number of different categories of disasters or disruptions. So resiliency is, by definition, is the ability to recover and respond effectively to a disruptive event. So that could be a pandemic, it could be a blackout. I use the example, it could be actually a squirrel taking out a power line, which is actually a regular occurrence as a little known fact. So for instance, my team works on pre-hazard mitigation is the term. So there's a whole skill set around hazard mitigation planning. So the hazard is the potential disruptive event that causes a location, a school, a building to not be resilient. So we plan around how do we harden and defend communities. So a lot of the lessons that we've learned are already implemented at military installations. So it can be planning buildings to make sure that they're not in a flood zone, or planning infrastructure and making sure that we have enough generation, that we have a mix, that it's not just coal-fired powered electricity. It could actually be wind or battery storage and solar as a combination, just so if one fails, we have a backup. So a lot of it, there's a lot of opportunities to work on the planning phase, and you don't have to be an engineer. I myself do not have a professional engineering degree, and I did a lot of the planning work by studying what had been done in other countries and with working with military installations and working with utilities. So the post-disaster space, there are opportunities too. We work a lot with an agency called the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. So there's a lot of opportunities to come in becoming a FEMA badged employee, where you actually help inspect sites that have had a disaster. So there's a lot of opportunity there, where you can be a certified floodplain manager or work on the communications front as well.
Wow, so there's a ton of opportunities and a ton of being able to get, and a lot of opportunities, it sounds like, to be in the field as well.
Absolutely.
Jeff, can I jump in for a second? Because I've been listening to Gail and to Amy, and from an outsider looking in, it seems like we're in totally different industries. But the reality is, and I'm just going to speak for New Jersey, when you are involved in sustainability and in the environmental fields, we all run in many circles together. Gail mentioned the League of Municipalities, and I'm thinking about all of the nonprofit environmental organizations that show up there. And, Amy, I remember when I first sat on the commission and PSEG was looking to give grant money. And I was thinking to myself, why is, a utilities company looking to fund sustainability, yet the amount of amazing work that PSEG has been funding and doing their own work in the environmental field, like, there is something to be said about cooperation in order to have healthy competition. And, we all really overlap in so many ways. And what private industry does for schools as well in education is really powerful.
I would agree with everything that Mike said. I think too, one of the things that was really impressive was when Amy was talking about how your students were making big decisions. Like the students were making decisions on buses, making decisions on, and it sounded like even making hard decisions and hard recommendations for these different companies too. And let me see, I think I'm missing a question. Oop, where is it? Oops, oh, okay. So David just asked, whoops, where, going into it, for all, can I see it? What advice do you have for parents to get their middle and high school students to care more about sustainability and the environment and become interested in pursuing green careers?
I would say just connect it to something that they already care about. So if they care about video games, they can probably code. If they can code, they can code for green jobs. And so I think if you find something that they enjoy already, it might be reading, it might be writing, it might be nature. And so if you're taking them on hikes and they're learning plant species and they can do plant ID, then they can do wetlands delineation and they can work for an environmental consulting company. So there's all these connections. And so I kind of build on something they love already and connect it to something green.
Yeah, and again, I think all of us we didn't have like, this is what we're going to do and that's what we did. If you look at my resume, I never studied anything related to the environment in college. But it was something that I loved to do, and I figured out ways to incorporate it into what I was doing. I was listening to a young woman, a senior in Monroe Township, speak the other day that she wants to go into environmental pediatrics. There are jobs that are out there that we don't even know will be created yet by the time you graduate from college. So, just if you're prepping yourself for what you love to do, and that, sustainability is something that is just going to be, at the forefront of conversations, stick with it.
Yeah, those are great points. I'll just add that I think there's a lot of synergy between emerging technologies and sustainability, where the use of drones is really hot right now, and we can't find enough drone pilots actually in our industry. Those that can be licensed to help us with surveying sites that we can't actually physically go to. And that's a big part of our environmental work and disaster recovery and sustainability work, right? And I think the incorporation of just being able to also go to field visits, I guess as a parent, there are a lot of actually private companies that offer tours of their operation. I actually had the fortune of getting a tour of the Port of Elizabeth in Newark, which was fantastic. It reminds me of Star Wars, right? Seeing all the straddle carriers. It actually inspired the movie Star Wars, the port. So for me, that kind of inspired me to get more involved and see how all of the machinery can work, especially as they're going to become more green actually as well.
Excellent, great. And then I guess our last question for the evening is for each of you is like one either amazing or surprising thing that people about your job that would probably surprise people. Like, is there something where like everyone be like, whoa, didn't see that coming?
Besides being on this panel?
Well, this is pretty exciting.
For me, it's just the willingness of people to be creative and come up with really great opportunities, especially for students. Um, you know, I go to work every day because really cool things happen. People call me, people email me, they stop by, and they have these opportunities. And sometimes it's big corporations, and sometimes it's not. And it just keeps coming. It's a lot of really great kinds of things that you can't anticipate and you can't imagine yourself. And they don't even necessarily know exactly what it is they want, but they're allowing the students to be creative and to come up with the solution. And so the way that these the partners that I work with, the external organizations outside of the university, the way that they allow students to explore what they don't know, that those people didn't study, but the students are studying now, new fields, and to apply that is just heartwarming. But it's also like really, it gives me hope for the future, because it means that there's opportunity to really kind of put effort toward fixing some of these problems that we have right now, especially with climate change.
Wow. I think hearing hope makes it is really a good thing, and it coming out of the winter, and that's wonderful. And then Michael, Gail, do you have any parting thoughts or parting words?
So something that's surprising about my job that those might not realize is that a majority of my the skill sets that I use are soft skills and not technical skills, actually, in the engineering space, because I work with a great team of engineers, and we partner a lot with architects as well as many other professional companies. But a big part is actually psychology, the ability to network and have coalition building, because if you don't understand the drivers for why your client wants a green project, or if you don't have an understanding for how you can bring a number of stakeholders and entities together to make a sustainable project work, then the project could be dead in the water. So actually a large part of my day is actually studying personalities and what are the drivers behind making a project work. So, yeah.
Excellent. And then Mike.
I guess for me, one of the amazing things, but also most rewarding things is, and I'll give you an example. 2 weeks ago, I received an email from a student from Westfield that was in my class 18 years ago, who is now a teacher in Virginia. And she was basically saying, it was a teacher appreciation email, that she was so excited because she was going to be teaching her 4th grade class all about sustainability. And she was a little kind of shocked and, a little taken aback by the fact that they were so unaware of so many topics. And she said, but then I thought back to my 5th grade experience and a certain teacher who kind of woke me up to a lot of the things that I was unaware of. I think what's amazing is it's just, we have to keep educating people. We have to keep letting people know what's going on, and often do it by just, through our own actions, being good models for stewardship. And, hopefully it just keeps paying its dividends.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for all of our panelists for coming in tonight. This was amazing, and this is going to be a wonderful opportunity for our students to see and to go back and review. And I hope that this serves to be a very inspiring opportunity for all of our students. The last thing that I would like to say to our panelists and also to all of our participants, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen once more, is we will have the series continue next week. And at 1 to 2 o'clock on Monday, the 24th, we will be hearing from panelists discussing fields in protecting nature and water. On Tuesday, the 25th, municipal and land use planning, government sustainability, and solar energy. And on the 27th, we will be hearing more about careers in conservation, sustainable construction, and solar energy. All of these presentations will be, and discussions will be, they will be recorded, and we will be sharing out how to get to the recordings later next week. Thank you all for coming in tonight. Thank you all for your time, and we hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night.